Welcome. This is Ted Sherrill, the president of the ISACA Greater Houston chapter. This short video will work to answer the question on how to leverage software providers to enable your ransomware initiatives. In our recent ransomware panel, I discussed the importance of leveraging your strategic software vendors to assist you with providing a resilient environment for ransomware attacks. Many software vendors have complementary assets for their software that will assist you with aligning to the various frameworks and guidance. As the Senior Director of Resilience at Oracle, I assist many customers with what capabilities they can use from the various software solutions. This may sound straightforward, but many times the capabilities that can be utilized are dependent on the version of the software as well as the application that it supports. The U.S. government's National Institute of Standards and Technologies, commonly referred to as NIST or NIST, has developed a cybersecurity framework profile for ransomware risk management. This framework has 5 categories, which are key for formulating an optimal approach concerning ransomware. First, the ability to identify and classify your systems and data based on the criticality and the availability requirements is the first step. Secondly, utilizing technology controls in a manner that protects the environment is helpful in preventing a hacker from gaining access. Third, early detection of an intrusion and the ability to limit its spread or lateral movement is also very helpful. Fourth, having the proper procedures and policies in place to respond along with the attestation needed is important. And fifth, the ability to recover systems quickly that have been compromised can be the difference in an organization's ability to move forward. All of these combine to create a resilient approach from ransomware attacks. So this slide shows us the areas that we just spoke about, such as identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, along with the categories that support those areas, such as asset management or identity management, anomalies and events, etc. This helps us to gain a greater understanding of what are the controls needed for these categories, and how do I work to align my specific software solutions to these controls to ensure that I've got a proper alignment to this ransomware framework provided by NIST. If you drill down on one of these, such as data security, the categories break out into further guidance referred to as subcategories. Such as integrity checking mechanisms, etc. These give you further clarification on the types of controls that are needed to support this specific category within NIST. Your software providers should be able to show you an example or a mapping of their capabilities over to frameworks like this NIST cybersecurity framework for ransomware. This is an example here on the screen of some Oracle database capabilities that are mapped over to the specific NIST ransomware framework. The framework you can see is down in the first column on the left-hand side. Next to that are the specific frameworks like ISO and NIST that it also cross-references to. And then next to that are the specific Oracle database capabilities that would be applicable to that specific category or guidance. Additionally, your software providers should be able to give you an example overview of how you would go about enabling those controls within your environment. For instance, here we're looking at not only can you do this for structured data, but of course the Oracle database can support unstructured data as well. It also shows that if a hacker gains or tries to gain access, they try to encrypt the database files, obviously, to make the database unavailable. And they also try to compromise your privileged credentials. The Oracle database has its own encryption that can be utilized, which is very helpful that if the hacker tries to exfiltrate the data or copy the database files externally out of your environment, then those database files will remain encrypted, and the hacker would not be able to see or access that data, and they would not be able to release it out on the internet, which could cause you regulatory issues, etc. So the ability to have that, sustainable control, whether it's within your environment or outside of your environment, is extremely helpful. In addition, things like having a hardened control plane, network segmentation, etc., these can help ensure that the infection of the hacker or the malware does not move laterally or limits its lateral movement. And also, of course, the ability to utilize things like Oracle Autonomous Database or Database Lifecycle Management to ensure that all critical patches have been applied in a timely manner and that the system's being properly monitored. Ultimately, that will help ensure that you have a secure database and one that can quickly be recovered if an infection were to occur. The CISA, also a division of the US government, is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. The CISA came out with basically their best practices. This culminated out of the NIST framework for ransomware, and really was to address, the framework is great, but there are a lot of categories to it, just like we saw. So out of all of that guidance, what would be the best practices? What are the things, the top wins, if you will, that an organization should look to employ first? This gives you, these are the CISA best practices that they came out with. And for instance, if we look under vulnerability management, you'll notice the guidance about employing multi-factor authentication for all services to the extent possible. Clearly, this is helpful in preventing not just the straightforward hacks of ransomware, but also supply chain attacks, etc. So let's take a look at, if your software vendor, they should align, in addition to the NIST framework, they should align their capabilities also to guidance such as the CISA's ransomware best practices. So, obviously, from an Oracle perspective, you could utilize, for the multi-factor authentication guidance, you could utilize identity management. This could be either on-premise or identity management provided in the cloud. There's a capability, complementary capability contained within the Oracle Enterprise Edition database called Centrally Managed Users. This allows native integration with the database with Microsoft Active Directory. But again, this is for release 18C and forward of the Oracle database. So again, going back to my comment about versions, it's important to understand what version you're utilizing. If you are on 18C or 19C, etc., then this is a capability that you could utilize so that you could leverage your Microsoft Active Directory to manage your DBA accounts or any other Oracle database account within the databases. In addition to that, another included capability of the Oracle Enterprise database is called strong authentication. So even up to being able to do biometric authentication, etc. So clearly you can take multi-factor authentication to the level that's needed, and even do strong authentication. And we see this a lot for extremely powerful accounts, such as DBA accounts, etc. And then there are capabilities also within the Oracle database, like Oracle Database Vault. Oracle Database Vault, I refer to it as the valet key for the Oracle database. What I mean by that is, yes, DBAs need to manage and maintain the database, but that doesn't mean that they need access to all of the information within the database. Because if one of those database credentials is compromised, such as what we saw with the SolarWinds attack, where they could actually utilize these system administrator logins and compromise those, then it would limit what that account would still be able to see. Just as a valet key, when you take your car to a mechanic, yes, they need to start and stop the engine. They even need to take it for a test drive to make sure the tune-up work, etc. But what they don't really need to do is to get in your glove compartment or even the trunk of your car normally. So a valet key allows them to do all of that, but does not allow a mechanic to be able to access your glove compartment of your trunk. Oracle Database Vault does the same thing, especially for what we call privileged users or system administrators. And if they do try to access those areas, alerts are fired off on that so that you're alerted to that. And in addition, it has even attribute level authentication, if you will, so that you may only be able to, you can set it that you can only log into a database during certain times of the day or within a certain IP subnet, so that way you ensure that someone is on premises or within country, etc., when they're logging into the database. These are additional attributes that you can use to help further ensure that proper access and multi-factor access to the database is being accomplished. So again, there's a lot of capabilities here. And again, you need to look at what's the right combination of these to utilize, and when would you utilize them and why. And one of the ways that you would go about doing that is you'd look at the criticality of the system. And so being able to assess your environment and your systems and know the criticality of those systems and what are the suggested controls that you would utilize for, for that type of an environment. And so here we can see Oracle follows kind of a metal system, which is fitting considering the Olympics just finished, such as bronze, silver, gold, and even platinum. And these are based on criticality of systems. So you would group your systems into the appropriate level of criticality that they have. And then these are suggested controls that you could look to deploy for those systems based on the criticality that they have. Obviously, for non-mission critical systems like development, test, etc., it may not make sense to apply the same level of controls to those as it does, for instance, for an order entry system that may be up at the platinum level, because you need that system up 24/7 taking orders. Therefore, applying the appropriate level of controls provides you the proper level of resilience that you need based on the criticality of that system. Again, your software vendors should be able to offer up suggested controls and which ones you would use for the various levels. And with that, I hope that was helpful and helping you understand how to go about aligning with your software providers to formulate a resilient architecture for ransomware. Thank you.